She laughed with tears in her eyes, only moments before the world she knew was ripped apart. She didn't see the betrayal coming, but when she touched her face the next morning, nothing would ever be the same. Her name was Mia. She moved to the city with dreams, internship by day, side hustle at night, sharing a small apartment with someone she thought she could call a friend. Her roommate, Avery, seemed kind at first, warm smiles in the hallway, borrowing utensils, chatting about life. Mia never suspected that behind Avery's polite calm, something dangerous was quietly growing. One evening in early spring, Mia went to the bathroom, closed the door, and opened her favorite tub of cream, a rich, floral-scented formula she used every night before bed. She scooped a bit out, inhaled the soft fragrance of jasmine and peony, rubbed it into her skin. But that night, as she fell asleep, she felt a burning pain creeping across her cheeks. She jolted awake, hands clawing at her face in horror. She screamed. In the hospital hours later, the doctors told her, chemical burns, deep damage, possibly permanent scarring. Her heart pounded as she tried to remember. Had she touched anything unusual? Could it have been a mix-up? But then she found a half-used bottle of acid hidden behind bathroom products, a bottle marked with safety warnings, and a receipt from a chemical supply store in Avery's name. She confronted Avery. She asked, "Why?" Avery's eyes were cold and blank. The thing she whispered made Mia's gut drop. "Because you outshined me. Because you were everything I wasn't." Over the next weeks, Mia's life unraveled. She endured surgeries, sleepless nights, nightmares of mirrors that refused to show her reflection. She isolated herself, withdrawing from friends, asking, "Is that me behind this bandage?" Meanwhile, Avery vanished, leaving behind lies about a breakup, about stress, about mental illness. Noah, Mia's best friend, brought her soup, held her while she cried, asked her to keep fighting. 6 months later, police tracked Avery down in a small town nearby. They arrested her for attempted assault, possession of dangerous chemicals, and more. In court, Avery claimed it was a breakdown, but evidence showed months of planning, of resentment, of jealousy. Mia sat in that courtroom, face hidden under a scarf, every nerve raw. Her voice caught when the judge asked if she wanted to speak. She said, "I trusted someone. I lost everything, but I'm still here." In the end, Avery was sentenced. Mia slowly rebuilt her life. She started volunteering at support groups for acid attack survivors. She picked up painting again, each brushstroke a reclaiming of her skin, her identity, her voice. She looked at her reflection and whispered, "You are more than this wound. So tell me, if it were you, and someone you trusted destroyed part of you in the dark, how would you feel? What would you do?" Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Amara was the kind of young woman people noticed, not just for her beauty, but for the warmth she carried. She walked through the market with laughter on her lips, greeting vendors by name, always stopping to help an elderly woman carry her basket or a child chasing after his mother. Her skin seemed to glow in the sunlight, and neighbors often whispered that she was blessed. Beside her, Chinwe appeared quieter, reserved. She avoided crowds, spoke only when spoken to, and often retreated into the shadows of their small apartment. To outsiders, it looked like harmony, two women chasing dreams, supporting each other, navigating the struggles of city life together. But in Chinwe's heart, every compliment Amara received felt like another reminder of her own insecurities. She stared at the same mirror Amara used each morning, touching her own reflection, and whispered, "Why not me?" That whisper soon grew into something darker. Mama Nkechi, the elderly woman who lived just across the corridor, noticed the shift. She saw how Chinwe's eyes lingered a second too long on Amara, how silence filled the air after Tunde visited. Mama Nkechi, wise from years of watching neighbors rise and fall, once pulled Amara aside and said gently, "My daughter, shine your light, but watch those who stand too close to it. Not everyone smiles with love in their heart." Amara laughed softly, brushing it off, believing that Chinwe was incapable of harm. To her, Chinwe was more than a roommate. She was family. They cooked together, shared stories of their childhood, and promised to lift each other up no matter what. But promises are fragile things when envy is allowed to fester. And then there was Tunde, charming, ambitious, and deeply in love with Amara. He admired her strength, often telling her, "You carry yourself like the future you dream of is already here." He thought Chinwe was simply shy, never guessing the bitterness she carried in silence. Every time he held Amara's hand, every time he brushed a strand of hair from her face, Chinwe felt a sting that grew sharper. She wanted to be admired, to be chosen, to feel beautiful in a world that always seemed to favor Amara. But instead of speaking her pain, she swallowed it. And with each swallow, resentment dug deeper into her soul. What Amara didn't know was that the girl she trusted most, the one who sat across from her every night at dinner, was quietly nurturing a secret that would soon shatter both of their lives. It began with words so small that Amara almost missed them. Chinwe would watch her apply her skincare at night and say with a smile, "You're lucky. Not everyone has skin that hides their flaws so easily." At first, Amara laughed, thinking it was harmless. But the tone lingered in her mind, soft but sharp, like a thorn hidden beneath a rose. Then came the little slips, Chinwe reaching across the dresser and accidentally knocking over a jar of Amara's expensive cream, the lid cracking, half the product spilling onto the floor. "Oh no, I'm so clumsy," Chinwe said, bending to clean it, though her eyes flickered in a way Amara couldn't quite explain. These weren't accidents. They were cracks in the bond she thought was unbreakable, yet she convinced herself it was nothing. One evening, as the sun sank behind the rooftops and the street below filled with the sound of children laughing, Mama Nkechi sat on her wooden stool by the door. She watched Amara returning from work, groceries in hand, a tired but radiant smile on her face. With a voice heavy with concern, Mama Nkechi called out, "Amara, come, sit by me a moment." Amara set the bags down and leaned in. The old woman looked into her eyes and whispered, "Not every smile is a friend, my child. Some smiles hide storms." Amara chuckled softly, brushing the words away. She believed in goodness, in loyalty, in the bond she shared with Chinwe. After all, hadn't they been through so much together? Hadn't they promised to lift each other up? To Amara, suspicion felt like betrayal, so she ignored the unease that flickered in her heart. But that choice would prove costly. Later that night, as Amara washed her face in the bathroom, she hummed quietly, unaware of the eyes that lingered on her from the doorway. Chinwe stood there for a moment, her expression unreadable, her hands gripping the frame just a little too tightly. When Amara turned, Chinwe smiled faintly and said, "You really don't know how lucky you are." Amara smiled back, not realizing the weight behind those words. She had no idea that the friend she trusted most was standing on the edge of betrayal. She had no idea that Mama Nkechi's warning was the last chance she would ever have to protect herself. Amara brushed it off, not knowing it would be the last time she felt truly safe. Tunde began visiting more often, bringing laughter and life into the small apartment. He would arrive with bags of fruit from the market or little surprises tucked under his arm, an extra scarf for Amara when the evenings grew cold, or a notebook for her endless dreams. Chinwe would sit quietly in the corner, pretending to read, her eyes following every gesture between them. Each time Tunde reached for Amara's hand or brushed her cheek, Chinwe's chest tightened, a silent ache clawing deeper. To Amara, it was love. To Chinwe, it was a daily reminder that she was unseen, unwanted, standing in the shadow of someone else's glow. One evening, as Amara stepped into the kitchen to stir a pot of soup, Chinwe lingered near the doorframe. She overheard Tunde's voice, low and tender, as he said, "What I love most about you, Amara, is your confidence and your beauty that shines without trying." Those words sliced into Chinwe like glass. She pressed her lips together, her fists tightening by her sides. In her mind, it wasn't just about affection anymore. It was about worth, about being compared and found lacking. Each compliment Tunde gave Amara became an insult Chinwe silently carried, a constant reminder that she was invisible. Day by day, her resentment thickened into something heavier, more consuming. She no longer simply envied Amara, she obsessed over her. Every smile, every compliment, every glance from Tunde seemed like fuel, feeding a fire she could no longer control. Chinwe began keeping to herself, scribbling in notebooks late into the night, watching Amara with a stare that lasted too long. Her thoughts twisted into questions. Why her? Why not me? And slowly those questions turned into a dangerous resolve. Was this about love, or something far more dangerous? After months of careful saving, skipping little luxuries and setting aside every extra coin, Amara finally bought herself something she had long dreamed of, a rare, expensive skincare cream. She held the delicate jar as though it were treasure, her eyes glowing with pride. To her, it wasn't just a product. It was proof of her hard work, a reminder that even small victories could carry great meaning. She told Chinwe, smiling, "This is my little gift to myself." Chinwe nodded slowly, her face calm, her voice flat. "You deserve it." But behind that calmness lay something Amara couldn't see, a quiet storm that refused to settle. That evening, Amara placed the cream carefully on her dresser, its golden lid catching the faint light of the lamp. She hummed a soft tune, applying just a small amount before slipping into bed. Sleep came quickly to her, the kind that only visits after a long day's labor. But across the room, Chinwe remained awake. She sat upright in the shadows, her eyes locked on the jar. The stillness of the night made every sound sharper, the ticking of the clock, the rustle of fabric, the rhythm of Amara's gentle breathing. Chinwe's gaze never wavered, her expression unreadable, her body rigid as though frozen in thought. To Amara, that cream was hope in a bottle, a symbol of her confidence and the future she believed she was building. But to Chinwe, it became something else entirely. Each time the jar caught her eye, it whispered reminders of the beauty, the attention, the love she would never have. In her mind, it was no longer just skincare. It was a weapon, waiting for the moment she would choose to turn it against the very person who trusted her most. Soon, little things began to unsettle Amara. A favorite scarf she left folded on her bed vanished without a trace. A necklace she often wore appeared days later in a drawer she rarely opened. At night she thought she heard whispers in the corridor, faint murmurs that stopped the moment she drew closer. She asked Chinwe if she had noticed anything strange, but Chinwe only smiled thinly and shook her head. Amara brushed it aside, convincing herself she was imagining things. Yet the unease settled in her chest, heavy and unshakable. Mama Nkechi, however, saw what Amara could not. From her place across the corridor, she noticed how Chinwe lingered too long outside their door, how her eyes followed Amara with a look that carried no warmth. She watched her pacing late at night, lips moving as if speaking to someone unseen. One evening, Mama Nkechi muttered to herself, "That girl's spirit is restless, and it will not end well." Her warnings had already gone unheard, but her instincts told her the storm was drawing closer. And then came the night that should have been like any other. Amara sat before her mirror, the prized cream resting on the table, its golden lid glinting under the lamp. She hummed softly as she dipped her fingers into the jar and smoothed it across her skin. From the shadows of the room, Chinwe watched. Her breath was shallow, her hands trembling at her sides, every muscle in her body urging her to act. The silence was suffocating, and yet she held back. For reasons even she could not explain, she chose not to move that night. But her restraint was not mercy. It was preparation. The moment was coming. and soon nothing would ever be the same. The night was heavy with silence. Amara slept peacefully, her breathing steady, her face turned toward the window where moonlight spilled through the curtain. But across the room, Chinwee's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Slowly, she rose from her bed, her footsteps barely brushing the floor. She reached into the corner of the wardrobe where she had hidden a small, unlabeled bottle. Her hands shook as she held it, the sharp chemical scent rising into the air. She placed Amara's treasured cream jar on the table, unscrewed the lid, and whispered under her breath, "Let's see if you're still so perfect after this." With a chilling calmness, she poured the liquid into the cream, stirring it just enough for the surface to look untouched. She replaced the lid, slid the bottle back into hiding, and stood in the darkness, watching Amara sleep as though nothing had happened. The morning came like any other. Birds called faintly outside, and the city slowly stirred awake. Amara, unaware of what awaited her, sat before her mirror, humming softly as she reached for the cream she had cherished so dearly. She twisted open the golden lid, inhaled the familiar floral scent, and smiled. Scooping a small amount with her fingertips, she spread it across her cheeks. At first, there was nothing, only the cool glide of the cream sinking into her skin. She sighed with relief, ready to face another day. But within moments, the calm shifted. A tingling spread across her face, sharp, relentless. Her breath caught in her throat. The tingling turned to fire. Amara's eyes widened in confusion before she let out a scream so piercing it rattled the walls. Clutching her face, she stumbled backward, her knees buckling as the searing pain consumed her. The mirror reflected her horror as she collapsed to the floor, writhing in agony. Her cries filled the apartment, echoing down the corridor. Doors opened, neighbors gasped, footsteps hurried closer, and then Chinwee appeared in the doorway. She rushed to Amara's side, feigning shock, her voice trembling as she shouted, "Amara, what's happening? Oh my God!" She knelt beside her, hands hovering as if to help, her face a mask of concern. But behind her eyes lay something no one else could see, a cold satisfaction, hidden beneath false panic. In that moment, Amara's life had been changed forever. Yet this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Because what happened next would expose a truth darker than anyone could imagine. In the hospital, the air was thick with urgency. Doctors moved quickly, voices overlapping as they called for saline rinses, bandages, and pain relief. Amara lay on the bed, trembling, her screams reduced to whimpers as the searing pain consumed her face. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled the room, mixing with the faint sting of chemicals still clinging to her skin. Nurses whispered words of comfort, but nothing could soften the reality. Her face, once the pride of her confidence, was now marked by deep burns that would take months, if not years, to heal. Through it all, her eyes darted around, searching for answers, for something to explain the nightmare that had suddenly swallowed her life. In the hospital, the air was thick with urgency. Doctors moved quickly, voices overlapping as they called for saline rinses, bandages, and pain relief. Amara lay on the bed trembling, her screams reduced to whimpers as the searing pain consumed her face. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled the room, mixing with the faint sting of chemicals still clinging to her skin. Nurses whispered words of comfort, but nothing could soften the reality. Her face, once the pride of her confidence, was now marked by deep burns that would take months, if not years, to heal. Through it all, her eyes darted around, searching for answers, for something to explain the nightmare that had suddenly swallowed her life. By her side, Chinwee played her role flawlessly. She clutched Amara's hand, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling with rehearsed panic. "You'll be okay, Amara. Stay strong. I'm right here." To everyone watching, she was the devoted roommate, the friend who had witnessed a tragedy and refused to leave her companion's side. Doctors nodded at her loyalty. Neighbors praised her for her quick response. But inside, beneath the mask of sorrow, Chinwee carried a secret satisfaction. No one suspected her, No one saw the truth, one, except Mama Nkechi. From the moment she heard Amara's screams echo through the corridor, her heart had known something was wrong. She stood silently at the hospital doorway, her eyes fixed on Chinwe, studying every gesture, every word. While others saw grief, Mama Nkechi saw calculation. She watched the way Chinwe's tears fell on cue, how her hand never trembled when the doctors described the burns, how her gaze flickered, not with despair, but with something colder. In her wisdom, Mama Nkechi whispered to herself, "That girl knows more than she lets on." Suspicion had taken root, and it would not let go. Not long after, the police arrived at the hospital. They began interviewing neighbors, friends, anyone who might have known what happened to Amara. Clipboards in hand, they asked about arguments, visitors, unusual behavior. The corridors buzzed with speculation. Some whispered about a freak accident, others about sabotage. And through it all, Chinwe kept her mask firmly in place. When her turn came, she lowered her gaze, her voice trembling as she told the officers, "I think it might have been Tunde." She spun a web of lies with practiced calm, painting Tunde as a jealous, controlling boyfriend. She spoke of late-night arguments, of raised voices, of threats she claimed to have overheard. Every word sharpened the suspicion against him. "He was obsessed with her," she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "I warned her, but she wouldn't listen." The officers scribbled notes, their faces tightening with concern. By the time she was done, Tunde's name was no longer that of a loving partner. It was marked with suspicion. Days later, Tunde was taken into custody for questioning. Neighbors watched in shock as the police led him away, his protests echoing down the hallway. "I love her. I'd never hurt her," he shouted, his voice breaking under the weight of betrayal. Amara, still recovering, could barely comprehend what was happening. The one person who had stood by her, now accused of destroying her. And behind it all stood Chinwe, her lies weaving a trap so convincing that even the law was caught in its threads. But the truth wasn't just about jealousy or love. It was about something much more sinister. One afternoon, while Chinwe was out, Mama Nkechi slipped quietly into the apartment. She moved slowly, her steps deliberate, her eyes scanning the room with the caution of someone searching for ghosts. In Chinwe's corner, beneath the narrow bed, she found a box pushed far back against the wall. Inside lay the bottle, small, unmarked, but heavy with the sharp chemical scent that lingered even through its cap. Mama Nkechi's heart sank. The truth she had suspected now rested in her trembling hands. This was no accident. Amara had been betrayed by the very person she trusted most. Instead of running to the police, Mama Nkechi chose a different path. She decided to confront Chinwe herself, believing that the truth, once spoken, would reveal more than accusations ever could. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the corridor bathed in gold, she called Chinwe into her small kitchen. The air was thick with silence. She placed the bottle on the wooden table between them and said softly, "My daughter, this is yours, is it not? Do not lie to me. The truth always finds its way out." At first, Chinwe froze, her lips parting but no words escaping. Her eyes darted between the bottle and Mama Nkechi's steady gaze. Then, slowly, she broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks as her body shook with sobs. "You don't understand," she whispered. "All my life they mocked me, for the scars on my arms, for not being pretty enough. I watched girls like Amara walk through life with ease, with love, with beauty. I was always the shadow, always the one left behind." Her confession spilled out in fragments of pain and bitterness, envy that had festered for years. In that moment, Mama Nkechi saw not just malice, but a wounded child hiding inside a woman consumed by jealousy. But even as Chinwe wept, the weight of what she had done could not be undone. Mama Nkechi's hands trembled as she held the bottle, listening to Chinwe's broken words spill into the quiet room. For a moment, compassion battled with anger in her heart, but she knew the danger was too great. This was no ordinary envy. It had already destroyed one life, and it could destroy more if left unchecked. With steady resolve, she rose from her chair, stepped into the corridor, and made a single call. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder, closer, until red and blue lights painted the walls of the old building. In the hospital, Amara heard the commotion and insisted on being present. Wrapped in heavy bandages, her face hidden but her spirit unbroken, she stood tall as the officers brought Chinwe forward. Her voice cracked but carried the weight of her pain as she whispered, "You didn't just hurt my face, you tried to destroy my soul." For the first time since the attack, Amara's words were not those of a victim. They were the voice of someone reclaiming her strength, even in the shadow of betrayal. Chinwe's composure shattered. She thrashed against the officer's grip, her face twisted with rage, her voice echoing through the hospital halls. "You had everything," she screamed. "The world loved you and I was invisible. Do you know what it's like to never be seen, to always be second, to live in the shadows of people like you?" Her cries were not just anger. They were years of pain erupting all at once, raw and unfiltered. The officers tightened their hold as Chinwe struggled violently, her screams piercing the air until they were drowned out by the sound of her own sobs. In slow motion, neighbors watched as she was dragged away, her body kicking, her voice fading into silence. Amara collapsed into tears, her shoulders shaking as Mama Nkechi pulled her close, whispering prayers into her ear. It was the end of Chinwe's deception, but for Amara, it was only the beginning of the long road toward healing. In the quiet weeks that followed, Amara's world became a rhythm of hospital corridors, bandages, and whispered prayers. The doctors spoke gently, their words both kind and cruel. Her beauty, they said, would never be the same. The flawless skin that once turned heads was gone forever. Yet, in the stillness of her reflection, Amara began to see something new, a strength rising from within, fiercer than before, unshaken by the fire that had tried to break her. Each day, Tunda sat by her side, holding her hand through the silence, through the tears, through the fragile moments where hope felt out of reach. And though Amara often looked away, ashamed of her scars, his gaze never wavered. He saw her, not for the beauty she had lost, but for the resilience she carried now. Slowly, the laughter returned, faint but real, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. One afternoon, Mama Nkechi arrived with her gentle smile and knowing eyes. She placed her wrinkled hand over Amara's and spoke words that sank deeper than any medicine could reach. "True beauty is not in the skin, my child. It is in the scars that tell your story, for they show the battles you survived and the strength that no one can take away." Amara closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her, and for the first time since the attack, she smiled, not for who she had been, but for who she had become. This story isn't just about envy, it's about the danger of hidden pain, the kind we bury so deeply it turns into something destructive. Amara's scars became symbols of her survival, but Chinwe's silence became her downfall. What would you have done if you were Amara, forced to face such betrayal? And what if you were Chinwe, carrying wounds from the past you never spoke of? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if this story touched you, hit the like button. It helps us share these lessons with more people who may need to hear them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss more unforgettable stories like this every single week. The story fades with a soft, reflective instrumental track, leaving behind a silence that lingers in the heart long after the final words.